When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. The file had not been opened in 291 years. It sat in the lower maintenance stack of the Grand Velhari archive, buried under 12 layers of older data, flagged only because an automated system had noticed its dead status field was still marked pending. The archive's cleaning program had passed over it 47 times. Each time it had been too small to matter and too old to delete without a supervisor's sign-off. Archivist soon had the sign-off authority. He also had nothing better to do on a slow rotation cycle. So he opened it. The record was simple. A Velhari patrol vessel called the Quiet Margin had come across a drifting colony ship in the outer belt of the Dren's corridor. The colony ship had no power. It had been floating for 9 days. The crew was alive, barely. The Quiet Margin transferred food stores, 2 crates of water filtration units, a portable medical kit, and a navigation data package before sending the ship on its way toward a habitable system. 4 weeks out, total cost of aid, minor, logged as a charitable transfer under Galactic Emergency Protocol. A debt record was created as a formality. The rescued ship was supposed to file a repayment notice within 10 years. It never did. Soon read the species tag and felt nothing. He had processed thousands of these old records. He typed the species name into the current Galactic registry just to close the loop properly. The registry returned a file. He read the first paragraph. Then he read it again. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The species tag read human. He pulled the current file on humans and told himself he was being thorough. The file was not small. It had been updated regularly over the past 140 years. Most recently, 18 months ago, following a border negotiation in the outer corridor that had ended with 3 other species quietly agreeing to every human condition without a single counteroffer. There were attached reports from 6 different intelligence branches. One of them had a warning header in red. Soon did not usually read warning headers. He read this one. Humans, the file noted, came from a high-gravity, high-radiation world with extreme seasonal shifts and a biological history shaped by violent predator competition. Their resting body temperature made other species uncomfortable to stand near. They did not enter hibernation states. They had no submission reflex. In all of recorded galactic history, they had never once abandoned a conflict they had chosen to enter. Their average pain tolerance sat in the top 2% of all known species. Their soldiers volunteered. The word had been underlined in the original report by whoever first read it, as if that person had felt the need to pass their personal distress on to the next reader. The file also noted that humans carried a cultural framework around debt, an honor that several xenociologists had flagged as requiring further study. When a human society recorded an obligation, it was treated as a living document. It did not expire. It did not fade with time. It was passed between generations the way some species pass down land or names. Soom closed the file. He opened the original debt record again. The Quiet Margin had given food, water, a medical kit, and navigation data to a drifting human colony ship 312 years ago. The Velhari crew had not thought much of it. It was not mentioned in the captain's personal log at all, just a single line in the official report. An ordinary day, an ordinary act, the kind that gets forgotten by the next morning. He checked the colony ship's registration number. He ran it through the Human Colonial Authority database, which was publicly accessible and updated monthly. The ship had reached its destination. The colony had survived. It had grown over 3 centuries. The descendants of that single rescued vessel had spread across 4 systems. Current population derived from the original colony line. Approximately 4,600,000 individuals. 4 million people who existed because the Quiet Margin had stopped. Soon stared at that number for a while. Then he did something he had not done in 20 years of archive work. He did not close the file and mark it resolved. He did not delete it. He flagged it upward all the way to the senior administration desk, with a personal note attached that read, "I believe this record requires attention at the diplomatic level. I am not able to explain fully in writing. Please just read the species tag and the current file. You will understand." He sent it and sat very still. Somewhere across the galaxy, in a system the Velhari had not visited in decades, a human colonial authority clerk was doing her own routine work. She was cross-referencing old Galactic archive entries against the Human Memory Registry, a database maintained specifically to track the names of every non-human who had ever helped a human ship in distress. She found the entry for the quiet margin. She flagged it to her supervisor with 3 words, "Found another one." Her supervisor read it, leaned back, and began drafting a transmission. It was polite. It was formal. It was the kind of message that on its surface contained no threat at all. It began, "This is the Human Colonial Authority. We have located a debt record belonging to your people. We are coming to repay it. Please prepare to receive our delegation." The Velhari Senior Administration Desk received both messages within the same hour. Soon's flag from below. The human transmission from outside. The senior administrator read them in order. Then she called an emergency session and told her assistant to get her something strong to drink. When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. Delegate Myra had reviewed the human species file 3 times on the transit shuttle. By the 3rd read, she had stopped taking notes and was just staring at the wall. She was young for a diplomatic post. She knew that she had earned this assignment through 2 years of patient work and careful language, and she had been proud of it right up until the moment her supervisor handed her the briefing packet and said with a very flat expression, "Good luck." The shuttle docked at Orbital Station VET, and Myra walked to the observation deck first before anything else, because she had been told the human fleet was visible from there. She looked out the wide viewport and stood very still for a long time. The fleet was not what she had expected. She had expected warships, sharp things, the kind of vessels built with angles designed to suggest violence. What she saw instead was a mixed formation of heavy transport ships, long-range carriers, and what the registry identified as colonial authority diplomatic cruisers. They flew in clean, unhurried lines. No weapons were charged. No fighters were deployed in escort formation. But there were so many of them. 41 ships for a diplomatic repayment mission. 41. Each one flew 2 flags. The colonial authority seal on the left, and on the right, a symbol she had to look up. An old human design circular showing 2 hands and a set of old-style weighing scales. The research file told her it was used specifically when a debt of survival was being honored. It had not been flown in open space in over 60 years. Myra put her notes away and went to the receiving hall. She was not the only one watching. The Galactic diplomatic feed had picked up the fleet's arrival 4 hours ago and had not cut away since. Ambassador Rune of the Torah people was broadcasting live from a monitoring station 2 systems over, his voice slightly higher in pitch than his normal register. The human fleet has now fully entered Velhari territorial space. He was saying to an audience that had grown to somewhere in the hundreds of millions across a dozen species. They have filed all correct approach paperwork. All of it. Every form correctly. I want to note that for the record because I was not expecting that. His aide off mic said something. "Yes," Rune said quietly. "That is exactly what I am worried about." Counselor Yeva of the Prashari, watching from her private office, turned the feed off after that. She had been a diplomat for 40 years. She had dealt with humans twice in formal settings and had studied them for much longer. She did not need commentary. She poured herself a cup of something warm and watched the raw sensor feed instead in silence. Back on Thor, Ren Holt came through the docking corridor first. He was not tall for a human, which still meant he was taller than most of the station's regular staff. He moved slowly, not because he was being careful, but because he was the kind of person who had stopped being in a hurry a long time ago. He wore the colonial authority formal coat, dark gray with a white edge at the collar. No visible weapons. He carried a sealed container under one arm, a flat rectangular case about the size of a large book. Behind him came Darcelise, his second. She was younger, darker-eyed, and she looked around the receiving hall with the open curiosity of someone seeing a new place for the first time and finding it interesting. She smiled at a Velhari station worker who happened to make eye contact. The worker took a small step back. Myra stepped forward and introduced herself. She had practiced the greeting in 3 languages. Ren listened to all of it. He nodded once when she finished. Then he said in clean and careful Velhari standard, "Thank you for receiving us, delegate. We will not take more of your time than we need. We are here for one purpose, and we intend to complete it properly." Myra asked because she had to ask because her supervisor had told her to ask. "Can you tell us the nature of the repayment you are bringing? We received only that it was significant." Ren looked at the sealed container under his arm. Then he looked at Myra. "It is significant," he agreed. "But it is also simple. 312 years ago, your people gave ours the chance to survive. We have spent that time becoming something. We are here to give back a portion of what that survival made possible." Myra nodded and kept her face professional. Inside, both her hearts were beating too fast. She led them through the hall toward the formal reception room. As they walked, Dara fell into step beside her and said conversationally, "You have a nice station. The air recycling is better than most. You can tell because it does not smell like metal." Myra blinked. "Thank you." Ren says, "I should not compliment infrastructure on first meetings," Dara added. "But I think it is the kind of thing people work hard on and do not hear about enough." Myra did not have an answer for that. On the live feed, Run watched the 3 figures walking down the corridor together and said to his audience of hundreds of millions, "The humans appear to be making small talk. I am choosing to find this comforting. I will tell you if that changes." Ye, watching the raw feed alone, allowed herself a very small smile. The receiving hall doors closed behind them. In 41 ships outside, 4,000 human crew members went about their routines with calm efficiency, waiting for their envoy to finish what 3 centuries of memory had started. When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. Nobody had thought to ask what was inside the case. That was the thing Archivist Soom kept thinking about as he sat in the corner of the formal reception room, hands folded, trying to look like he belonged there. He had been brought in because he was the one who found the record. His supervisor had looked at him and said, "You started this, so you will see it through." He had not argued. He was beginning to wish he had. The sealed container sat on the table between Ren Hall and Delegate Myra. It was flat and rectangular and made of some dark material Soon did not recognize. There were no locks visible on the outside. There was only a small circular press mark on the top edge, the kind that read a specific handprint. Ren placed his palm on it. The case opened. Inside was a book. Not a data slate, not a drive, not a projection unit. A physical book bound in dark material. Its pages the color of old cream. Soon had not seen a physical book outside a museum in 30 years. Ren lifted it and set it on the table. "This is the ledger of the quiet margin debt." He said it has been maintained by the colonial authority of the Holtzi's line since the original rescue. Every generation has added to it. The current version was finalized 2 years ago when we confirmed the location of your archive. Myra looked at the book. "What does it contain?" "Everything we owe you," Ren said, calculated forward. He opened it. The first pages were old. The writing was small and careful in a hand that had clearly been trying to make the letters last. Soom could not read the human script, but a translation unit on the table rendered it in soft light above the page. It began with a list. Food, 42 standard ration packs. Water filtration, 2 units. Model V, H7. Medical supplies, 1 portable kit. Contents itemized. Navigation data, 1 package. Denny's corridor to the Aaron system. Below the original list, in slightly different handwriting, was a note. It said, "These things were given freely in a moment of great need by people who did not know us and ask nothing in return. We will not forget this. We will not let our children forget this. When we find them again, we will show them what their kindness became." It was signed with a name. Below the name was a small hand-drawn mark, the kind a person makes when they want to leave something personal in a document that might outlast them. The room was very quiet. Myra said carefully, "You mentioned the debt calculated forward. What does that mean exactly?" Draw leaned forward. She had a data slate in her hand, and she set it on the table beside the book. "It means we worked out what those original resources were worth in terms of outcome, not in credits, in what they made possible." The slate lit up. It showed a branching diagram, a family tree that kept splitting and expanding until it filled the entire display. 4,600,000 people, Dar said. That is the current population descended from the original colony ship. Every one of them alive because the quiet margin stopped. She swiped to the next page. "We calculated what those people built, the worlds they settled, the technology they developed, the contributions they made to human space, and then we asked what portion of that belongs to you, as the ones who made it possible." Soon heard a small sound from across the table and realized it had come from himself. "The answer," Ren said, "is significant." He turned to the middle of the book where the old handwriting ended and something newer began. He read the items aloud. Agricultural technology. A full archive of human crop adaptation methods suited to low light and high salt environments, the kind that had kept 3 struggling colonies from collapse in the past 40 years. Medical archives. 200 years of human xenobiological research, fully translated into Velhari standard. A standing defensive treaty offering human military response to any direct attack on Velhari home systems for a period of 30 years. And finally, an offer of 50 human volunteers to serve as Velhari planetary security advisors for a term of 1 generation, to be assigned wherever the Velhari government found most useful. Myra sat very still. This is far beyond what the original debt represents. "Yes," Ren agreed. "Then why?" Ren looked at her steadily. "Because what was given to us was not rations and water. What was given to us was the chance to exist. You cannot put a small number on that. You can only try to give back something that is worthy of it." Soon looked at the hand-drawn mark at the bottom of the first page, the little personal symbol left by a person who had been cold and sick on a dead ship 3 centuries ago, and had somehow believed strongly enough in the future to write a promise into a book. He thought about the 47 times the archive's cleaning program had passed over the debt record. He thought about how close it had come to simply disappearing. He put his hands under the table so no one could see that they were not entirely steady. When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. Myra asked the question that had been sitting at the back of her mind since the shuttle ride. She asked it carefully, the way you ask something when you are not entirely sure you want the full answer. The debt was 3 centuries old. It was not in any active registry. No one would have known if it stayed forgotten. Why did you look for it? Ren did not answer right away. He closed the ledger gently, the way you close something that matters, and set it flat on the table. Then he looked at Myra with the kind of expression that belongs to people who have carried something for a long time and have made peace with the weight of it. "We always look," he said. "That is the short answer." Dara beside him was quiet for once. She was watching her hands. Ren continued. "The long answer is a story. If you have the time, I would like to tell it." Myra glanced at Soon. Soon nodded once very slightly. The way a person nods when they are no longer in charge of what is happening and have accepted that fact. "Please," Myra said. Ren leaned back in his chair. He spoke in Velhari's standard throughout slowly and without stumbling, which told Myra he had practiced this not because he did not know the story, but because he wanted to tell it correctly in a language that his hosts could follow without a filter between his words and their understanding. The colony ship was called the Al-Uldren's Promise. He said it left human space with 214 people aboard. Families, mostly people who had applied for a colonial charter and waited 6 years for approval. They had sold their homes. They had packed everything into approved weight limits. They had said goodbye to everyone who was not coming with them. He paused. The engine failure happened on day 31 of the transit. Not a dramatic failure, not an explosion, just a slow system cascade that the engineers could not stop. They tried for 4 days. Then the ship went cold. No drive, no communications, long range, just emergency power and waiting. Myra thought about 214 people in a cold ship in the Dren's corridor and said nothing. They waited 9 days. Ren said the children were the hardest part, according to the logs. Not because they were afraid, because they were not afraid. They did not fully understand what waiting in a cold ship meant. They thought it was an adventure. The parents had to keep their faces steady so the children would not learn to be frightened by reading the adults around them. He looked at his hands for a moment. "I have read those logs many times. I know the names of the children. I know the name of the engineer who sat with them and told them stories about the stars outside the window to keep them occupied while the adults worked in the back trying to find anything they had missed." The quiet margin appeared on the 9th day. No warning. It just came. The Velhari crew did not ask questions. They did not negotiate. They assessed the situation and began transferring supplies within 2 hours of docking. The captain of the quiet margin, a female named Akaveth, wrote 4 sentences in her log about it. She said the ship was cold, the people were tired, the children seemed well, and the transfer was complete. She moved on the next morning. Myra processed that. She wrote 4 sentences. 4 sentences, Ren confirmed, because to her it was a minor thing, a morning's work, something any decent crew would do. He was quiet for a moment. To the 214 people on that ship, it was everything. It was the difference between the story ending there, in the dark of the Dren's corridor, and the story continuing for 3 more centuries. Every person in my family line exists because Akaveth took 4 hours out of her schedule and did not ask what it was worth first. Dra spoke for the first time in a while. Her voice was even, but there was something behind it. We were taught this story before we were taught to read. Every child in our colony line knows the name of the ship. Every child knows the date. We mark it every year, not with ceremony, just quietly. A day when we remember that we are here because someone chose to stop. Myra said, "What happened to the crew of the quiet margin?" Ren opened the ledger again near the back. There were names there, a list in careful print. We found the records. Most of the crew lived full lives. Akkad retired from service and died at home at an old age. She had children. Those children had children. He paused. We found them, too. We told them what their ancestor did. We showed them the ledger. Myra stared at him. You found the descendants of the quiet margin's crew. It took 11 years of research, Dara said. But yes, what did they say? Ren looked at the ledger. The eldest daughter of Akaveth's line is 83 years old. She read the full account. She sat with it for a long time. He closed the book again. Then she said she had not known that her ancestor had never mentioned it, that it must have been too small a thing on that side to bring up at a family table. The room held that for a moment. Too small on one side, Dara said softly, everything on the other. Soon had stopped pretending his hands were steady. He had given up on that some time ago. He sat in his corner and thought about Akaveth writing 4 sentences and moving on the next morning, and about 214 people watching a Velhari ship appear out of the dark, and about 4 million descendants who had grown from that one stopped morning. He thought about the debt record sitting in his archive for 291 years. He thought about the 47 times the cleaning program had passed it over. He was very glad it had. When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. Ambassador Rune had been broadcasting for 9 hours straight. He had started the day expecting to narrate a crisis. Every intelligence model his team had run, every scenario his analysts had prepared had pointed toward tension. Humans arriving in Velhari space with a fleet of 41 ships was the kind of event that ended careers, and sometimes ended treaties. He had written 4 different versions of his closing commentary, depending on how badly things went. None of them had prepared him for this. "I want to be precise about what I am telling you," he said to his audience, now numbering somewhere past 400 million across 9 species. The humans have been in that room for 6 hours. There has been no raised voice. There has been no threat. What our audio analysts have been able to pick up through the corridor sensors is the sound of people talking, just talking. And at one point, approximately 2 hours ago, there was a period of roughly 4 minutes in which no one said anything at all. His aide passed him a note. He read it. The Velhari government has just officially accepted the human offer in principle. That means the agricultural archive transfer will begin tomorrow. The medical records will follow within the week. The defensive treaty signing is scheduled for 3 days from now. He set the note down. I genuinely did not have a version of this story prepared. Counselor Yeva had turned her feedback on. She watched Rune with the patient tolerance of someone who had seen many people be surprised by things that were not in fact surprising if you had paid close attention. She drafted a short message to her research team. Begin compiling all recorded human interactions with non-human species across the past 2 centuries. Flag every case where a debt obligation or promise was involved. I want the full picture. We have been reading the wrong data. She sent it and turned back to the feed. Inside the reception hall, the formal portion of the meeting was winding down. Myra had pages of notes she would spend a week trying to organize. Soon had said almost nothing the entire time, and looked like a person who had learned something large and was still finding room for it. But it was the moment at the end that no one on the outside had expected. Admiral Oe came through the hall doors. She had been on her ship the entire time running the fleet. She had not been announced. She was not in the original delegation list. She walked in wearing her duty coat, no ceremony to it, and she crossed the room toward Soon. Soon stood up reflexively. The way you stand when something very large moves toward you with purpose. Admiral Osai stopped in front of him. She was not physically imposing by human standards. By Velhari standards, she was brought across the shoulders and carried herself with the absolute stillness of someone who had long ago run out of things to prove. She looked at Soon for a moment. Then she held out her hand. Soon understood the gesture. He had studied human contact customs the previous night in a panic. He took her hand. She shook it once firmly, and then held it for just a moment longer than the minimum. "Thank you," she said, "for not deleting it." Soon opened his mouth. He could not find anything to put in it. He closed it again. Oy released his hand, nodded once to Myra, and walked back out. Run's team had caught the moment on a long-range corridor camera with no audio. He described what he had seen to his audience. The admiral of the human repayment fleet crossed the room to shake the hand of the Velhari archivist who found the record. "I do not have audio. I do not know what was said, but I can tell you that the archivist has not moved since she left." He paused. "I think I understand now what we have been watching. This was never about the supplies. It was never about the treaty or the agricultural data or any of the formal items in that ledger. Those things are real, and they are significant, but they are not the point. He looked at his notes, then set them aside. The point is that 214 people were cold and afraid in the dark, and someone stopped. And the people who descended from those 214 have spent 3 centuries making sure that stopping meant something, making sure it was witnessed, making sure it was answered. His aide off. Mike said, "That is a good line." Run said, "I know, I did not write it. I'm just finally seeing it." Outside in Hari space, the 41 ships of the human repayment fleet held their positions with quiet discipline. On the lower decks of the lead vessel, crew members who had been awake through the long waiting hours were eating together at long tables, the way humans apparently preferred to eat in groups, with noise and overlapping conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter. A young Velhari station technician, assigned to monitor the fleet for any unusual activity, had been watching the crew on her sensor feed for 3 hours. She filed her report, which said, "No unusual activity detected. Crew behavior consistent with standard rest and meal rotation." Then she added a personal note, which she almost deleted and then chose to keep. "They look like they are celebrating something, not a victory. Something quieter than that. I do not have a word for it in the official language. I think the word might be relief." She submitted the report and went back to her monitoring, and the fleet outside held still, patient, and enormous, and finished with what it came to do. When humans came to repay their debt, the galaxy felt fear. 3 months later, the galaxy was still arguing about what to call it. The Galactic Council had 17 different proposed classifications on the table. Some wanted to file it under unprecedented diplomatic events. Some wanted a new category entirely. One junior delegate from the Horsey Compact had submitted a paper suggesting that the humans had essentially invented a new form of foreign policy that no existing framework could contain, and that the Council should convene a working group. The paper had been read by everyone and formally agreed with by no one, because agreeing with it meant admitting that no one had seen it coming, and no one wanted that in writing. Councillor Yeva had read all 17 proposals and rejected all of them. She submitted her own, which was shorter than all the others. It said, "What happened was not a new thing. It was a very old thing that we failed to recognize because we were not paying attention to the right stories. The recommended action is to pay better attention." Her proposal was also rejected, but it was the one people kept quoting. Myra's formal report ran to 90 pages. Her supervisor read all of it and told her it was excellent. Then her supervisor asked if she could add a section summarizing the core takeaway in plain language for the Administrative Council, which preferred shorter documents. Myra thought about it for 2 days. Then she wrote one paragraph. It said, "The humans did not come to impress us. They did not come to demonstrate power. They came because a record existed, and they believed that records of kindness should not be left unanswered. The repayment they brought was large, but the reason they brought it was simple. They were taught as children that a debt of survival is sacred. They have spent 300 years making that teaching real. I do not think we have a tradition like that. I think we should consider building one." Her supervisor sent it to the Administrative Council without further edits. Soon had gone back to his archive work. His days were the same as they had been before. Quiet, systematic, long. But he moved through the old records differently now. He opened things more carefully. He read species tags before deciding what to do with an entry. He had, in the 3 months since the fleet left, flagged 6 more pending debt records for review. 4 were minor and had no living parties to notify. 2 were not. One of them involved the Horsey Compact, who had given emergency passage to a human transport vessel 80 years ago during a navigational crisis near the Outer Rim. The debt record had been filed and forgot. Soon sent it to his supervisor with the same note he had sent last time. "Please read the species tag first." He was by this point something of a celebrity in the archive. He did not enjoy it. He was not built for it, but he had started receiving messages from archivists at other institutions across 5 different species, asking how he found the record and what the process had been.
He answered all of them honestly, he said.
I was doing routine maintenance. I almost deleted it. I am glad I did not. Dara Solis was back on the Colonial Authority's administrative ship, writing her own internal report. She was better at writing than most people knew because she talked a lot, and people assumed talkers were not also careful thinkers. She wrote, "The galaxy was afraid when we arrived. That is fine. Fear is a reasonable first response to something you do not understand. What matters is what replaces the fear once understanding comes." Ren was sitting with her when she wrote that. He read it over her shoulder and said nothing, which was his version of strong agreement. Myra sent him one message a week after the fleet left. It was short. She said she had gone back and looked up the crew manifest of the Quiet Margin. She had found the name of every person on board the day they helped the Aldrin's Promise.
She had submitted a request to have their names added to the Velhari Memorial of Recognized Service, a register usually reserved for Velhari citizens who had performed exceptional acts. The request had been approved in 2 days, which was, Myra noted, approximately the fastest anything had ever moved through Velhari administrative channels. Ren wrote back, "Avth would have found this very embarrassing. She seemed like that kind of person." Myra wrote, "I think the embarrassment would have been good for her." Somewhere in the Eastern Registry, in a building that processed incoming galactic transmissions, a night shift clerk named Boss was doing what Soon had been doing 3 months ago. Routine work, old files, slow cycle. He found a debt record. He almost passed it by. The species tag made him stop. It was not a Velhari entry. It was from the Fenari Mutual, a small quiet species in the Middle Systems, who had 106 years ago given emergency shelter to a human scientific vessel during a radiation storm, 3 weeks of shelter, food, medical care for 2 crew members with radiation exposure. The Fenari had asked for nothing. The human ship had filed a debt record with the Colonial Authority and then been caught in a restructuring of the registry system, and the record had drifted into an archive folder that no one had opened since. Boss stared at the record for a long time. Then he picked up his console and began drafting a transmission. 3 systems away, a Fenari administrative office received it at the start of their working day. The clerk who opened it read it twice. Then she went to find her supervisor. The message was polite. It was formal. It contained no threat. It said, "This is the Human Colonial Authority. We have located a debt record belonging to your people. We are coming to repay it. Please prepare to receive our delegation." The Fenari supervisor read it. She had followed the news from Velhari space 3 months ago. Like most of the galaxy, she understood roughly what this message meant. She sat down slowly. She looked out her window at the ordinary morning outside. Then she smiled just a little and began composing her reply.